Once upon a time, in a small village called Abura, deep in the heart of Ghana, there lived a young man named Kofi. Kofi was a hard-working farmer, known for his strength and courage. Every day, he worked on his farm, planting crops, and helping his neighbors. But there was something strange about the village of Abura. The elders often whispered about an ancient spirit that haunted the forest nearby. They called it the Ananka, a fearsome spirit with the body of a lion and the face of an old woman. The Nanka was said to roam the woods at night, searching for those who dared to wander too close. The villagers spoke of how, many years ago, a young girl had vanished while picking fruits in the forest, and her screams were heard echoing through the trees. Since then, people had been warned to never enter the forest after sunset. One evening, as Kofi walked home from his farm, he noticed the sun was setting quickly. He had taken too long in the field, and now it was getting dark. The village roads were quiet, and the air felt unusually cold. He hurried home, but just before he reached the village, he heard a rustling sound in the bushes. Curious and slightly nervous, Kofi walked closer. There, standing at the edge of the forest, was an old woman. She was wearing a long, tattered cloth, and her face was hidden in the shadows. Kofi stopped in his tracks, remembering the stories his grandmother had told him. The Nanka was said to take the form of an old woman to lure people into the forest. "Good evening, child," the old woman's voice was soft, but cold. "Come closer. I have something to show you." Kofi hesitated. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. His grandmother's warning echoed in his mind, "Never trust the old woman in the woods." But despite his fear, he felt drawn to her. It was as though her voice had some sort of power over him. "I have nothing to show you," Kofi said, his voice shaky but firm. "I must go home." The old woman smiled, revealing sharp, yellow teeth. "You don't want to miss what I have to offer. Come closer, child." Before Kofi could react, the ground beneath him began to tremble. The trees in the forest shook, and a deep growl echoed through the air. The old woman's form began to change, twisting and warping. Her arms grew long and bony, and her face transformed into something far more terrifying, eyes glowing red like fire. Her body now resembled that of the lion, with fur and claws, just as the elders had described. Kofi stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. The Nanka was real. "Run, Kofi, run," the voice of his grandmother suddenly shouted in his mind. The Nanka cannot be outsmarted, but it can be outrun. Kofi didn't need another warning. He turned and sprinted as fast as he could, his legs moving faster than they ever had before. The Nanka let out a roar that sent chills down his spine, but he didn't look back. The sound of its growl echoed in the night, growing fainter and fainter as Kofi reached the village. He burst into his house, slamming the door behind him. The village was quiet once again. He collapsed onto the floor, his chest heaving from the run. That night, Kofi couldn't sleep. He kept hearing strange noises outside his window, the growls of the Nanka. He knew that he had escaped this time, but the Nanka would never forget him. The next morning, when the villagers gathered to hear his story, the elders were silent. They knew what Kofi had experienced was real. They warned everyone again, never enter the forest after sunset, for the Nanka is always watching. And from that day on, Kofi never went near the forest again. But every time the wind howled at night, he would remember the terrifying face of the Nanka, and the sound of its roar that still echoed in his ears. And so, the story of Kofi and the Nanka lived on in Abura, a reminder to all, some spirits are not just stories, they are real, and they are always waiting for the next lost soul to wander too close.